Welcome back to East Coast Wagering. What a crazy end to Derby weekend with 80-1 Rich Strike taking home the roses. After a couple days to digest what we saw over these past couple days, I just wanted to give some final thoughts and what we can possibly expect to see as far as a field makeup for the Preakness. Rich Strike runs down the morning line favorite and the post time favorite in the stretch to take home the roses at 80-1. It was absolutely crazy, and I'm not sure that anyone could have ridden that horse the way that Sonny Leon did, any of those other jockeys in the entire race. I give all credit to the horse, but I have to confess I didn't have him anywhere. In fact, if I was going to throw one horse out in that entire field, it would have been Happy Jack, not Rich Strike. But Rich Strike was on my short list of tosses. In fact, I actually started to pick 3 in the Derby and decided to go all but took 3 horses out, and he was one of them in addition to Happy Jack and Summer Is Tomorrow. No discredit to the horse, no discredit to the connections. They had the horse ready and he ran the race of his life. I'm not sure that he's going to show that same kind of form in the Preakness, but I guess we'll see. I also give respect to Epicenter and Zandon, who both ran excellent races to finish 2nd and 3rd. They both made early moves, and they both held off all the other closers except for ultimately Rich Strike. I was completely wrong about how the pace was going to set up in this race. I actually thought it was going to be a little bit on the slow to moderate side. I really thought that Summer Is Tomorrow was going to have to ration his speed if he had any chances of winning this race. And as we saw, that wasn't the approach that they were thinking, I guess. And he ultimately finished dead last. He ran the quickest quarter mile in the history of the Kentucky Derby, and it showed at the end based on the placement of the horses that were close. Pace ultimately made this race, and we saw mostly closers there at the end. In fact, if you look at the top 6 horses at the half-mile pole, those horses in order were Summer Is Tomorrow in 1st, Crown Pride 2nd, Zozo's 3rd, Messier 4th, Taba 5th, Cyberknife 6th. Those 6 horses respectively finished 20th, 13th, 10th, 15th, 12th, and 18th. So as you can see, pace really did decide who was there at the end. And if just looking at those horses and where they actually finished, I actually kind of like Zozos going forward, finishing 10th in that race after pressing a very quick pace. So I actually wanted to go over something that was actually bothering me a little bit once I saw the Derby field makeup prior to the race, and even more so after I see the end results. Why exactly is the UAE Derby given the same weight that other races that have shown consistent form, like the Santa Anita Derby, the Florida Derby, the Bluegrass, all of the premier races, the Wood, they're given the same weight as the UAE Derby? And this has been happening since 2013 when the new updated Derby point standings took effect. I went back and I looked at the historical finishes of the horses that were coming out of the UAE Derby, and out of that 10-year period, we've had 7 years where at least one UAE Derby horse has come out of the UAE Derby to run in the Kentucky Derby. The 3 other years, we had 2 years where the winner and the second place horse elected not to come to the Derby. We had a 3rd year in 2020 during the pandemic where they just decided to cancel the race entirely. The other 7 years, 4 of those 7 years, the horse coming out of the UAE Derby finished last of the 20 horses. In 1 year, it was actually 19, but last 4 of 7 times the UAE Derby has finished last place in the Derby. And in fact, the best finish of any horse coming out of the UAE since 2013 is Lines of Battle in 2013 itself, where he finished 7th place. Why is this race given the same amount of weight that some of these other races are getting when it's shown over that amount of time that it is a fraud of a prep? And I really think that this needs to be looked at possibly by the Derby points board and weight this accordingly, in my opinion. Should we maybe go to a point system the way that we have for the English run to the Roses and the Japanese run to the Roses, where only the champion can get in? If that was the case, then we wouldn't have had a horse like Summer Is Tomorrow in the race, and this race could have turned out completely different. Ultimately, though, your winner is Rich Strike, and he ran a fantastic race. I'm going to show the head-on view where you can get a feel for what the jockey was seeing as he weaved in and out of horses, some that were just flattening out, some that were coming back in the field, to ultimately get clear on the rail to get up there to get first. One positive aspect of this race that I can point out, I've watched the race quite a few times now, and I don't see that any horse got a terrible trip. None of them just got completely taken out of the race like we saw in previous years with like the incident between Maximum Security and War of Will, which also had some other horses involved. We had other years where, like Thunder Snow, for instance, coming out of the UAE Derby, as I mentioned, came out and decided to try out his future career as a rodeo horse instead of a racehorse. So we've had some incidences in previous years, and I don't really think I saw anything in this race to give me the impression that any horse really was severely compromised. I mean, obviously you have the horses that were up close to the pace that were compromised by that fast pace, but that's horse racing. So credit to the winner and all the other horses that finished up close, and credit to the connections as well. Looking forward to the Preakness, it looks like we're going to get only a handful of horses coming out of the Derby. The winner, Rich Strike, is coming back, obviously. He's going to take his chances for the Triple Crown. We are also getting Simplification running back, who finished a fine fourth. And this is probably one of the horses that I'm going to be looking at for the Preakness, with the way that the field's shaping up right now. I have it listed who's probable and who's possible. We'll hopefully get a better picture in the next couple of days. Ultimately, we have Epicenter, who hasn't committed either way, so he is possible. I'm really hoping that he runs, because I think that this field needs a little bit more star power, and I think that if he doesn't run, this field's coming up a little bit on the weak side, in my opinion. And since I'm going to be there, that's even more hope that I get a chance to see Epicenter in person. I'm not sure about Zandon yet. Most of the lists are leaving Zandon off. I haven't seen where he's committed either way to being in the race or being out of the race, but it does seem like he's falling off most of people's possible lists, so I get the sense that he's probably not going to run. Maybe he's going to wait for the Belmont, which his closing style may actually fit better in that race. We're going to have a lot of new shooters. The two that come to mind that are probably the two that are going to get most heavily bet are Early Voting, who finished second in the Wood, and Secret Oath, who is possible to come back out of her Oaks win. Hopefully both of those run, and we'll get a nice field makeup in this edition of the Preakness. Speaking of the Oaks, as I said, Secret Oath's your champion. Second was Nest, and third was Desert Dawn. All three came from off the pace. It was a similar fashion to the Derby, a very quick pace. Echo Zulu got caught up with Ujiri early, and they ran fast fractions. Echo Zulu ran a fine race to finish fourth. She just couldn't ultimately hold off the closers with the fractions that she set, and Ujiri was nowhere to be found at the end. Secret Oath, perfect trip, set her up for the score easily. Nest couldn't keep up with her in the stretch, couldn't sustain the run that she showed in her previous effort. And third, Desert Dawn went off at 50-1, completely disrespected based off her previous effort at Santa Anita. And she's someone that you probably want to look at going forward. You're not going to get her at the 50-1, obviously, but a major player in this division, it looks like. And I completely missed her. My top horses were Kathleen O and Nest. Kathleen O really had no excuse for her fifth place finish. The race set up perfectly for a closing kick. She didn't really run into much traffic problems. She had a nice rail run, tipped out in the stretch, and just had nothing left. So, but congrats to the champion. Secret Oath ran a great race, and hopefully we'll see her again in the Preakness. Just some other quick thoughts on the rest of the fantastic undercard that we had. In the Old Forester, Santine ultimately prevailed over Mirror Mission. They gave us a fantastic stretch drive. Santine sat right off a moderate pace set by Tribuven and ultimately got the score. It looked like Mirror Mission got a head up over her in the stretch, but ultimately Santine battled back for the win, which the way that the turf appeared to be running actually is more credit to Santine's effort there. It seemed like in most of the turf races, or at least on Saturday, that the closers were coming for the most part. Even though it was a moderate pace, I do give credit to Santine, and I think that he's a major player in the turf division going forward. Mirror Mission, as a little bit of a price, got up there for second, as I said, and those were the two that were clear of everybody else. The third place was Adamo, who ultimately got up late to get third, but the top two were quite clear of everybody. In the Churchill Downs Stakes, Jackie's Warrior solidified his status as possibly the top sprint horse in the country. I think that he was the favorite in the Breeders' Cup Sprint last year and just came up a little bit on the flat side. He was able to set soft fractions in this particular race, and no one really challenged him. He's a standout, I think, in this field. It was quite possibly a single on most people's cards, but I think that he's definitely the standout player in the sprint division. Should be the favorite going forward in the Breeders' Cup again this year, as long as his form stays consistent. He was able to set fairly moderate fractions, but take nothing away from this race. He was geared down late to score by 4. I don't think any of these other horses there was ever any chance that these other horses were going to get to him. In the Pate Mile, we had the return of Jack Christopher, coming off a long layoff since 2021. He didn't make it in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile last year, or else he would have probably been the second choice behind Coronation. Who knows? That race could have ended up a little bit different with Jack Christopher taking it down. He was highly regarded. He looked great in this race. I don't think there was ever any doubt that he was going to win this. The field may have been a little on the weak side, but it's tough to say. Typically in the Pate Mile, you'll have a combination of horses that weren't good enough for the Derby and horses that don't want to go long enough for the Derby. Papa Cap ran a great race to finish second, but I think that Jack Christopher is going to be a major player in the 3-year-old division this year. Some lists have him possible for the Preakness. I haven't heard anything about that really, especially from the connections. It would be nice to see him wheel back, but that's pretty ambitious placement of a horse that hasn't run in over 6 months. So I guess we'll see what happens with this horse, but I'd like to see him in the Preakness, hopefully. I still personally think that's going to be doubtful, maybe for the Belmont, but I'm not sure that the longer race is probably this horse's forte. But I do think that this is going to be a major horse in this division going forward. The only knock I have on his race, and it was his first race back in quite some time, so not taking much away. He did weave a little bit in the stretch, so hopefully he'll have that figured out again going forward, and we're going to have another superstar hopefully on our hands with Jack Christopher. The one other race that I wanted to point out was not one of the stakes races. Race 4 on the card was an allowance optional claimer, and the horse that won it was named Creative Minister. Now, Creative Minister could run back in 2 weeks. He is on the possible list to possibly show up in the Preakness. And as I said before, this isn't looking like the strongest version of the Preakness field, so if Epicenter doesn't run, this thing could be completely wide open. This horse could go off at a nice price, and if he holds the same form that he had in this race, he could have a chance here in this field. So make sure you check out that race. I feel like that could have been possibly overlooked with all the fantastic stakes races that we had that day. So give it a look and see what you think about this horse, because we could see him back in 2 weeks. Well, those are my thoughts and reflections from Derby weekend. Hit the comments section and let me know how you did. Did you have Rich Strike in the Derby at 80-1? Was Secret Oath your horse in the Oaks? I quite frankly didn't play either of them really. I had a little bit of Secret Oath. She was a little on the logical side, but I liked a couple of the other closers a little bit better. I liked Nest and Kathleen O, so ultimately I didn't do too well in that race. And I didn't have Rich Strike anywhere in the Derby, but congratulations to everybody that did. Did you have any other big hits on the undercard? I'd say my best race was probably the Old Forester. Santine was my top play, and I did like Mirror Mission as a long shot in that race, so I did end up hitting the trifecta. But besides that, it wasn't my best Derby performance ever. So please remember to like and subscribe. It does help me grow my channel. I appreciate all the people that have commented and liked and subscribed to this point. I'd like to get a little bit of a bigger base so I can get some more exposure. But thanks again for watching, and hopefully I'll see you again in the future.